Welcome to the final session of the afternoon. If you've made it through this time, all the day, well done. Congratulations to you. We realise we are the only thing that's standing between you and a drink, or at the very least, the exit door and a night on the couch. So we'll try to keep this tight and hopefully entertaining enough to keep everyone interested. I've got a great audience with me today. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves first. Do you want to start off there as well, Paul? Yep.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Edmondson. I'm Commercial Director of a company called InSpirit Vision. We focus purely on identity and access management, and that's the four pillars of that headline, which is access management, identity governance, privileged access management, and SIAM. And we do the consultancy, the implementation, and managed services. And Charlie, I'm delighted to be here.
And next to you, Pat.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pat Ryan. I'm a Detective Superintendent attached to the Garda National Cybercrime Bureau. I suppose I'm there for the last 5 years, but I have about 30 years service, and I suppose I was just telling someone earlier my background as a guard I suppose has been slightly different to I suppose other guards, where I would have spent 23 years attached to Garda ICT, where I finished up as the head of IT operations and security before I joined cybercrime. So I suppose going from the operations and security side, I would have a good understanding, I suppose, of the challenges that face organisations. I know the one question I was always asked is, are we safe and secure? So I suppose it's a nice change for me to go into the investigation of cybercrime now. So I'll tell you more about that in a while.
Excellent, great. We'll be back to you shortly. Tracy, how about yourself? Would you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is Tracy Pound. I'm chair of the board of directors for CompTIA, who are the Computing Technology Industry Association. And that's a global trade association that supports the furtherment of the tech industries and professionals that work in the industry. We have certifications like A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, CYSA Plus. So we write formal qualifications for people who are working in those technical roles, and we sell those globally to the tune of about $200 million worth of certification sales a year. We have a trade association side, so we have a membership side that supports vendors, distributors, managed service providers, people who work in the tech industry, where we provide research to help them to improve their business, training and support, and networking events. So for me personally, I've been in the IT industry for almost 40 years now, so I've seen a massive amount of change since the 1980s.
Excellent, very good. Moving to you, Jill.
Yep. Jill Thomas, Director of Engagement on our Capacity Resilience Programme at the Global Cyber Alliance. Global Cyber Alliance are an international non-profit organisation. We were founded in 2015 by the District Attorney of New York, Centre for Internet Security and the City of London Police. And we're all about prevention as opposed to prosecution. So we provide free tools and resources that help you be safer when you do go online. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm sure you probably all know Paul. We've already had a few people outside looking to get pictures taken with him. So, but for anyone that doesn't, tell the audience about yourself, Paul.
So I'm Paul Dwyer. I am the president of the ICTTF. ICTTF, what does that stand for? The International Cyber Threat Task Force. And background 2010, 2011, the big thing in the news was things like Anonymous. We see those things today as QAnon and how they've evolved into these kind of mad disinformation groups and all that kind of stuff. But basically what we noticed was that the bad guys were all working together. They were sharing information, they were collaborating, they were helping each other. So we created a community and network based on the principle of it takes a network to defeat a network. We now have over 50,000 members around the world. We have a Cyber Risk Academy. We've developed leadership business level training from CCRO, Certified Cyber Risk Officer courses, down to DORA courses and so on. And we deliver events such as the EU DORA Summit, such as the EU Cyber Summit coming up in November, where we deliver qualifications, industry recognized qualifications. So we listen to the industry, what do you want? We develop the syllabus and we deliver that training so they can move forward with their careers and support innovation and business.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. This is very much a panel where we're hoping to get some input from you, so we will be open to you asking questions of us later. And while I'll be asking individuals particular questions, I'm hoping that everyone will join in as well where they think is relevant. I mean, Pat, I hope you don't mind us starting with you. I think everyone's always fascinated by what's going on from a sort of law enforcement side of things. You obviously see the victims of crimes, you know, firsthand, and how it impacts on businesses and individuals. I suppose, you know, to start off, you know, could you tell us, you know, about Angada and, you know, about the current cybercrime threats and trends that you're seeing?
Sure thing. We won't go with the horror stories just yet. Okay.
Let's start with the horror stories.
I suppose that, you know, the cybercrime landscape remains very wide-ranging, would be my view. And like what we're seeing is, you know, it's comprising of both lone and networked actors that, you know, with these people have, I suppose, very diverse expertise and capabilities when it comes to carrying out their attacks. You know, from a law enforcement perspective, we're definitely seeing that some of these cyber criminals that target, especially the EU, are EU-based. While others prefer to operate, I suppose, outside of the EU, and this is really to conceal their illicit operations and indeed funds in poorly regulated jurisdictions. So I suppose just from my perspective, and I suppose even from a law enforcement perspective, you know, really what we're seeing is the likes of ransomware is still would be considered the number one threat, whilst the likes of phishing would still remain still the number one kind of attack vector. And really what we're seeing as well is that small to medium businesses really are the ones that are most targeted. And this is because really the perceived lower cyber defenses that they may have. So definitely it's I would say the landscape, it is changing. We look at the new technologies that are there. And, you know, threat actors are very quick to exploit new technologies where they can as well. And it can be a challenge to stay one step ahead. There's no doubt about it. But what we're seeing from a law enforcement perspective is definitely the rise or the rapid growth, I suppose, in cybercrime as a service. You know, these threat actors have their business models. When you're looking from the outside in, they're very, very organised, and you know they have their models in place, and because of that, it's very easy, I suppose, for people or for threat actors or cyber criminals who aren't that technical to also to be able to buy these services and carry out attacks as well. We're also seeing, and I'm sure, look, we all know, you know, the space of AI and machine learning, and I suppose the value that that's going to bring to cybersecurity. But unfortunately, threat actors are going to also, you know, exploit this technology, and we're seeing that already when it comes to everything from social engineering, and I'm sure we're all aware where we've seen things like even right down to voice mimics of CEOs where companies are being defrauded out of a lot of money. And even for, you know, when it comes to generating scripts for malware or whatever it is, this is where, you know, the machine coding or machine learning, language learning, models comes in. So I suppose access to these types of threat vectors, I would say now, are very, very easy. And it definitely is a challenge for, I would say, to try and stay one step ahead, because they will exploit where they can. I suppose, you know, when it comes to law enforcement, I might talk a little bit more about this in a while, the importance of working together and cooperation, not even from a law enforcement perspective, police-to-police perspective, but it's them public-private partnerships that really, really add value. And I can talk a little bit more about that in a while. But definitely, from a law enforcement perspective, we do have successes. I don't know if any of you are aware, even only this morning it was publicised, where we worked very closely with Europol and our other law enforcement partners, where we were able to take down the phishing website's LabHost, and officers attached to the Garda National Cybercrime Bureau were very much involved in that operation. So we can have successes, and I might just talk about a little bit about that later on as well.
That's great.
So that's just kind of a very broad overview.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tracy, yes. Let's come to you. I know you wanted to talk in particular about the awareness of MSPs, managed service providers. Could you touch on that for us?
Yeah, sure. So, as you've alluded to, it's a very complex landscape, the world of cyber. And in order to try and tackle cybercrime, everybody's got to play a part in having a solution to move forward. And MSPs are in a position of trust for many of their clients. A lot of end users, whether or not an MSP provides it, perceive that their MSP will be providing cybersecurity support. And it becomes very difficult then if an end user gets hacked and they don't realise before they've been hacked that actually they're not covered because they chose not to take some of those cybersecurity services from an MSP. Some of that, I think, is down to language. In the tech world, we have so many acronyms, it's unreal. You could have a whole stream of sentences that are just full of acronyms that end users don't understand at all. And I think we need to do a bit of a better job in the channel at explaining what cyber risk is to people in human terms, in business continuity, business risk terms, in order to get people to understand why they should take cybersecurity products and solutions, and that it's kind of an insurance policy, isn't it? So, and I know a lot of insurance companies these days are starting to mandate that you have to have regular cybersecurity awareness training in order to qualify and have that policy. So there's a lot more kind of regulation compliance coming in that we need to be aware of. We need to be able to explain the very complex world of cybersecurity and cyber risk to end users. That's not always an easy thing to do. And sometimes we just get a flat no. The end user is not interested in spending any more money and they give us a flat no. But our job is to explain to them what their risk is in saying no. And I don't know that we do a good enough job at that all the time. And I don't know that we educate end users as to what cybersecurity actually is, what it encompasses, and therefore why they should take those services. And the difference is, we have terms. We've got MSPs, we've got MSSPs. That means nothing to an end user. They're not in our world at all. So there's a lot of communication issues that sit around that, but a massive amount of opportunity, I think, for MSPs to be able to explain cybersecurity. And from the stats I showed this morning, if you were in that session, while cybersecurity at the minute doesn't account for a huge amount of the overall revenue and services that MSPs offer, a lot of MSPs are looking to add more revenue, more profit from cybersecurity. So there's a lot of awareness, a lot of training that's needed in order to get to that point, I think.
I think that's an excellent point you make there, particularly about the need to explain better, because I work as a journalist covering tech, and a lot of the time I kind of think my role is sort of as a translator. There's the techies, there's the end users. Let's translate the tech stuff for the end user, And sometimes I find myself bewildered, as you're sitting there and it's one acronym after another, and you're kind of having to break it down and kind of go, okay, explain it to me as though you were talking to your mum. Do you know what I mean? Because then that way I can explain it better to our readers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit like coding, isn't it? Because, when you write code, it's easy to explain what that code is in technical terms, but to try and translate that into a language outside that people who have got no understanding of it, so that they can understand it. I think that's a difficult translation to achieve. And we tend to then go in with product solutions. So, we make a mental leap and we see that this client has this issue, therefore this product will solve that issue. So we talk to them about that product, but they're not interested in the product. They don't care what the product is. They care that they have protection for their business that covers these areas of risk. So it's not that we're doing the wrong job, it's just that sometimes we miss the point of communicating back to the end user that it's not the product that they're interested in, it's what that product's delivering for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of acronyms, we've got the acronym IAM here, Paul. Now, obviously, earlier you were facilitating a panel, Modernising Identity and Access Management for Enhanced Security. Tell me about IAM, how it's evolving, and future trends in the space.
Crikey. Thanks, Charlie. I've got a whole shopping list of things here, and of course it continues to grow. Identity and access management is just one small part of the cybersecurity puzzle. So I'm just going to touch on what it means to protecting individuals' identities and preventing unauthorized access to information and things. I'll tell you what, Michael, I've seen a lot of overlap today between what's been said in the various presentations, and it kind of makes it sound as if we know what we're talking about, and there's been some thought put together in terms of how it's structured. So, Michael, thank you for that. I think it's been a very worthwhile day. But going back to my part, firstly, many organisations have had identity and access management in their workplace for a long, long time. It's quite a mature industry, and there's lots of products out there. And some of the users are in second generation, including the lady sat at the front there that she introduced herself to me. I haven't seen her for 10 years, which has been amazing. And we worked together many years ago, and she's actually now, the bank that she represents, has got into second generation. So it's all moving forward, shall we say. And that some of the legacy stuff that's out there is a major consideration, because a lot of that stuff's on-prem. And what people are looking at now is trying to create a hybrid model, prem and cloud, before they take the big plunge into a cloud scenario. So there's a lot to think about in terms of taking that forward. But when we were involved 20 years ago, the identity model was fairly comprehensive. Identity and access were kind of merged together. And I now see that they are separating a little bit. So you've got access governance and identity governance and privileged access management as kind of three entities. And I'm experiencing more and more of the separate PAM projects, especially in this part of the world, so that certainly means something. I'm also seeing more SaaS solutions, so we're moving to the cloud big time. So a lot of these on-prem product developers are having to race into catch-up mode. But with that, there's a lot of new organisations coming around which are very agile, very nimble, very innovative in terms of what they're doing. And in terms of new product coming forward, I think anybody interested in an IAM solution should certainly have a look at the marketplace or work with an organisation that understands that, for sure. Zero trust. I mean, everybody's talked about zero trust today, haven't they? You know, why? Well, because of the threats. And what you say is these guys are ahead of us. You know, they're not going to stop just because we're thinking about zero trust. It's something that's ingrained now in a lot of software in terms of how it's presented and incorporated. So authentication, you know, does that need to get stronger? We talked about two-factor, now it's three-factor. It's all that combination. And authentication is moving forward with that adaptive authentication. And what does that mean? It means that we can look at trends in the way that individual identities are actually logging into a service. And if Pat here does a normal 9 to 5, and I'm sure he doesn't, yeah, his trend is Monday to Friday 9 to 5. And if he calls in from Istanbul at 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe we've got an issue here. So adaptive authentication looks at the modeling of the way an individual would access information. And of course, with that, we see a rise in AI. Yeah, you know, that's what's driving that. And somebody asked me a question, actually, in the session, what does AI mean? And everybody's face went blank, because it probably means different things to different people, doesn't it? It's an emerging world, and we've got to embrace it. And I think, you know, your bad actors are certainly embracing it. And we've just got to make sure that we're ahead of the game. And Paul told us all about DORA and regulations and changes and things. Well, that's part of identity management, big time, and the compliance with that and the need for. And also part of my presentation this morning was a chap talking about integration of IT and OT. And that's a big subject in its own right. And certainly worth us all considering that operational threats and information threats are something that we've got to consider moving forward. People still want ease of use, whatever they're doing, and that's something that will continue, I hope. Users want things simple, don't they? Let's make it as simple as possible, but as easy to use as possible. So the cyber world is evolving, and it's evolving quickly and dynamically. And for us, that's a good job. Otherwise, we'd all be out of a job. So thank you.
That's great, Paul. Thanks. Jill, moving to you. I mean, as Paul was just saying there, the cyber world is continually evolving. Now, you were going to touch on cyber hygiene. Could you kind of talk about that and how, that's always been important, but obviously with things progressing, I'm guessing it's more critical than it's ever been.
Yes, absolutely. Because with the introduction of AI, the fact that the cyber criminals can send more authentic-looking emails, do a lot more phishing, it can all be more personalised, and they can do it quicker, they can do it cheaper. We talk about them being organised, and they know exactly when we're disorganised, when we're trying to get out for the weekend, when we've got things on our mind, and when they're more likely to hit us and be successful at that. But throughout all of that, it means that we do need to be on our guard all the time, and it's that essential cyber hygiene, the basics. It's the making sure everything is up to date. It's the password management, the authentication, as we've already spoken about, having those backups, having antivirus software. They are important, and they just continue to be important. And some of those are sort of not necessarily overlooked, but it's quite often the new shiny thing that's exciting. But all the time we've always got to be mindful of that, and it's the behavioural change, and especially in the small businesses and those vulnerable communities who maybe don't think that they're vulnerable, who don't believe that they're a target when actually they're easy pickings because they aren't doing what they should be doing, and they don't have the money, they don't have the resources. Where we come into it is that we provide free toolkits, free resources that enable them to really understand but also implement what they need to do to be significantly safer. And where MSPs are unable to support them because they do not have the money necessarily, they're still in great need of that support and those tools. And so we're able to help those real grassroots organisations to at least get on that ladder to understanding it, to implementing it, and then at the right time move on to those services that are provided as well.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Jill. That's brilliant. Paul, there's been a couple of mentions of DORA already. Can you touch on that? I mean, in terms of legislation, what role is sort of DORA having? What is it, a catalyst? Is it is it same as we've seen before? I mean, is this revolutionary in terms of what it brings?
Absolutely. So, look, DORA is yet another piece of legislation, but it is a catalyst because it's something that we can all benefit from. It's aimed at the digital economy. It's going to make things a lot safer from threat actors, not just criminals, but nation states. I've often been up on the stage talking with the likes of Vladimir Putin and so on, and how those things and those entities are converged with the threat actors that we see as organised criminal groups as well, who took down our own health system during COVID. The Conti ransomware group, to Pat's point, still one of the biggest threats all businesses face is things like ransomware. To Jill's point in relation to things like basic cyber hygiene, that's what DORA is about. It's based on the fundamentals of basic cyber hygiene, and make sure you have those things in place. So when people look at DORA and go, another piece of legislation, what am I going to do? Well, there's some great things in DORA. It's making accountability very clear. The management board of the financial entity are responsible for ICT risk. No if, buts, whens, no blaming a supplier, no blaming an IT manager, all of those kind of things. The book stops with leadership. Now, when it comes to cyber hygiene, one of the strongest things that we can take from this is when you go off actually self-reflect and navel-gaze. Do you have cyber hygiene? The amount of large, complex organizations that I often visit or we'll assess and we'll break down the level of maturity of controls they have in place and the multi-million euro budgets they're spending. Nobody is going to get fired for not buying something like FireEye or something like that. But you will if you haven't documented your network, or you don't have a network map, or you don't know where your ingress points are, your egress points, all that boring, pedestrian, mundane stuff. But here's the thing, cybersecurity maturity is cumulative. You can't walk out and buy level 4 maturity. You can't buy level 3 or level 2. You have to have the basics in place, or what you're spending money on is absolutely a waste of money, because it may not operate. Simple examples, if you don't have the robustity of logging turned on properly, if you don't have your synchronized your time clocks properly, how are all of those systems going to work when you're trying to investigate what's happened on your network? They won't. And all of that technology you thought was going to be fantastic and it looked brilliant when the salespeople showed you, it's useless to you because you haven't got the fundamentals right. So start with the fundamentals. They're what I call red-faced items. You will have a red face if you have to explain to somebody why you didn't have those things in place. Why are you coming to the board with a 2-year-old Visio diagram and telling them that that's your network? When the law is now you have to have an up-to-date network diagram and understand what's on your network and what's it composed of. That's what DORA is. What's on your network? What's your critical important functions? What's that made up of? Where's the interconnections? Where's the interdependencies? It's all common sense stuff. But through the rush of innovation, through the reaction to COVID, through all of those kind of things, we kind of lost our way. We got caught up in the shiny things, as Jill puts it, those bright, shiny objects. That's a big factor. So this is a great chance, Dora, to take a fresh look at this, for the business leaders to take a look at this. Cybersecurity is not an IT issue, it's a business issue. It's not a cost, it's an investment. That's the way you need to talk to your board. That's the way they need to understand. That's the way it is.
Just to touch on that, and you might continue with this, Paul, and it would be great if everyone else jumps in as well. I mean, just on that, I mean, are we seeing more chief security officers, being taken seriously at the executive level for the fact of things like DORA? I mean, is that helping to encourage business leaders to see this as an investment rather than an expense?
Well, I'm seeing that from a leadership point because one of the reasons why, for example, our Cyber Risk Academy brought out the Certified Cyber Risk Officer course was because we saw this disconnect. We saw these things about acronyms. PCMCIA, hands up, who knows what that stands for? What is it?
One person.
You're the only one.
I'll give you my
have to
version.
answer, you're the
I'll give
only
you
one
my
who knows
version.
this.
I'll give you my. No, to be fair to you, I'll give you my version. People can't memorize computer industry acronyms, right? Because that's a better one, right? Or as I often talk about, is BOBFOC, right? Body off Baywatch, face off Crime Watch. And I often use acronyms like that when I'm talking to people because it's just bullshit. It's misogynistic often terminology that's being used within businesses to try and intimidate people to think that IT is something special, something cool, and disconnect from the business. We need to break down those communication barriers, understand the business. The amount of CISOs I have talked to, C-level CIOs, that don't understand how the bank they work for works. How does it make money? Oh, I don't know, we sell mortgages. That's not how the bank works. If you don't understand the bank, if you don't understand how it's making money, what's the 5-year strategy? How are you developing an IT or a cybersecurity strategy to support the business mission of that entity? It doesn't matter whether you're a 2-user business or whether you're 20,000 users or whatever. The principles are exactly the same. Understand what the model is, understand what the ICT requirements are, understand what the legal, business and regulatory requirements are around using that technology, and make sure you're balancing the risk in implementing that to support the business mission. That's the job. That's the job. Not getting caught up in we're spending all the money because we think Unit 61398 or the People's Liberation Army are going to hack into us tomorrow because we just read that in the newspaper, or that Putin's coming for us or something like that. It's not that. It's getting the base right, keeping the operations going. And it's the game is a bigger one to play now because we're in the digital economy. We have no choice. We're heading for the digital euro, everything else like that. So this is it. And we need to make for our foundations. This is a competitive advantage for a country, never mind a business, to get this game right. You know, when NIS came out first, the first version of NIS, that was to add on 500 billion to the GDP of Europe, right? This thing makes a difference in the world. The more secure you are, the safer you are to do business with and operate with. I spoke this morning for any of you who saw that speech about trust. Trust in innovation, trust in collaborating, trust in transacting. So cybersecurity, cyber risk management, all these things are about establishing trust, and that starts with the basics.
Does anyone else want to touch on this as well? I'm kind of intrigued as to the idea of that there are more business people taking note of it as an investment rather than an expense.
Yeah, I might just add a comment there. I suppose, look,
you know, there's definitely a heightened awareness with regards to IT security over the last number of years. We've all seen the things that have happened at national level and things like that. So, you know, but Paul makes a very valid point there. You know, there's a lot of acronyms, and really, when it comes to IT security, I suppose what we're seeing even, and not just in Ireland, but across Europe, is, you know, it's about getting the basics right. And like regulation, yes, it's there. It's going to make us all more resilient and our systems more resilient and even the user experience more secure. But the human factor has a big part to play in this, in our response, I suppose, to security. And too many times I've seen, you know, when something is reported to the guards, it's them basics that aren't right. Something is you know, has gone wrong. And unfortunately, we're all only human at the end of the day as well. And trust me, things can go wrong. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can be a victim of a cybercrime. And it's how we respond is what's important. And something I was going to talk about was about kind of reporting as well to law enforcement. And sometimes people ask, well, you know, what's the benefit of reporting to law enforcement? Well, first and foremost, you know, we're there to support victims of crime. And, you know, if you're reporting a crime, we're there to support you. We'll provide, you know, advice is where we can, and support, because trust me, if something goes wrong, it can be a very traumatic time. If you're right in the middle of it, something has happened. And, you know, and we fully appreciate, I suppose, that, you know, returning operations or whatever it is, that's the priority at the end of the day, business continuity. But we are there to support and advise where we can. And in fairness, the officers attached, especially to the Garda National Cybercrime Bureau, are very experienced in dealing with these types of incidents. And they will be able to provide you with the advices that you may need at that very critical time. So I suppose we also have that connect to, and I know I said I'd touch on it earlier on, to our law enforcement partners throughout the world, and this includes Europol, Interpol. So by reporting to us, we will also feed that information into our intelligence channels with our other law enforcement partners. And through understanding what's, you know, by reporting to us is informing us, it's letting us know what's happening. We're able to provide advices to the public or to businesses where we can, but we also have, I suppose, that channel, as I said, to our colleagues throughout the world in the law enforcement. And that leads us to building up disruption operations, and as you can see, we've done that a number of times. We're very much involved in that space. We work with Europol. We also work with a part of Europol, which is known as the JCAT. It's the Joint Cybercrime Action Task Force, where we will target various different threat actors. And indeed, we only had a success that was publicised this morning there. Last year, we had Hive. So we will work with an organisation, though. And as I said, we will fully investigate the matter. But at the end of the day, we're there to support victims and to fully investigate. But I think the key message I'm trying to get across is help is available, because it can be a very traumatic time. And, you know, we're not there to take over your systems and all that. We're there to help, and we will work with your, I suppose, your response teams with regards to recovery. And indeed, I've seen it in the past where, you know, when something is reported to us and we're made aware of it, we have access, as I said, to our partners throughout the world. And indeed, we can sometimes even aid with recovery in various different instances. Not always, but sometimes we have that piece of intelligence which will assist. So just getting back to Paul's point, you know, and I think even Jill said it, it's getting the cyber hygiene part is important. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. Just making sure that the basics are right. But we are all human, and sometimes things can just go wrong.
Absolutely, yeah. And
sorry, no, I was just going to, just on the point of the awareness, it's moving from that awareness, because we can say you need to be doing this, that and the other, but it's really down to those businesses to take that first step and to come to the table. It is a two-way thing, and whilst regulation makes them come to the table, for those other organisations that aren't regulated, don't have to do it, they are the one, they have to take that first step, because we can't do that for them. We can advise. We can have the tools there. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, essentially. And so often, going on another analogy to do with horses, I don't know why I've picked on that, but too often, yeah, maybe that is.
You're in the right place. If ever there was a day for it, today's good.
It's sort of it's shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted, and when you're reporting it, and when you're then looking at maybe we need to be doing this, it's too late then. So taking that first step before it happens is where we need to be.
And I saw you nodding your head on quite a lot during the last two comments there. What's your take on this?
Absolutely. And I think it's very true. There are two sides of the coin. There's reactive support and there's proactive support that's preventative, and we need both at the minute. We have a lot of problems with a lot of cyber attacks, so we really do need that reactive support. But we need to move the world more into a proactive situation. And some of the research that CompTIA does on an annual basis, one of the bits around cybersecurity is that the number one priority going forward from 2024 will be around governance. So how do we bring governance in? And governance is that kind of awareness and putting ourselves in control and holding ourselves accountable for what we do, which makes things a little bit more proactive. But as an industry, if we don't have governance, what comes is compliance and regulation, because other people then say, you're not responsible, so we will make you responsible. And that's exactly what we've seen in the cybersecurity world. So we have a duty of care to be more self-controlled and have that governance internally, to just switch that over. And when you look at AI, we've talked about AI, adversarial AI is something that is on the increase. We know already, now today, that hackers can access AI and use it to write automated ransomware attacks, to write targeted phishing emails, and they'll do it way better than ever before. So before, where there might have been spelling mistakes or grammatical errors, now there won't be. They will look very, very authentic, and it will be very difficult for people to spot. So we have to do something that is way more proactive, I think, in this arena.
Thanks for that, Tracy. Jump in there.
Can I just add a small point to that, Charlie? Just in relation to law enforcement and reporting incidents and so on, we need to park cynicism. Okay, so we live in the real physical world, but somehow we think that there's no point in reporting digital crime because what's the point? What are they going to do? But actually, the Guards, the National Crime Agency over the UK, law enforcement generally, Europol, are making great strides and great impact on what they're doing. But if they're not told about it, that statistic doesn't exist, therefore they don't get the budgets and the resources they need, and you can keep whinging about that there's no one to investigate this stuff. So you're kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom and gloom, and the Guards will never help, and you can't get this and you can't get that, whatever, if you're not reporting. If it's reported, something will happen and there will be action. And I can tell you from real world experience, the best in the world are in Garda Síochána around all of this area to investigate really sophisticated stuff. That's why they're at the table with Europol. That's why they're at the front lines dealing with these kind of takedowns and everything else as well. So I just want to emphasize that point, because I do get a bit annoyed on their behalf hearing someone say, oh, what's the point of something? You let it go. If there was 50,000 handbags robbed or wallets robbed tomorrow out on the streets, there would be riots on the streets. But because it happens in digital wallets and digital accounts and so on, nobody's doing a thing, right? It's the same thing, right? So you have to report this stuff. We all have a technical socio responsibility as a community of digital citizens to report crime. Because if we don't, we are the ones standing at the side listening to somebody who's carrying out a crime, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a hate crime, whether it's stealing money, whatever it happens to be, you are part of it. You're basically standing there and condoning it, letting it happen if you're not reporting it, right? So I do want to emphasize that, because there's oftentimes called into incidents and they don't want to report them. They think it's going to be a qualitative risk to the business and everything else like that. I'll give you one horrible example where somebody will find some dodgy material, let's just call it dodgy material, and we go, and I said to the guy, how would you feel if that escalates and that person attacks a woman? And they said, yeah, okay. I said, you have a moral and a legal obligation to report what we have found on that system. End of story. There is no if, buts, and whens. So it doesn't matter whether it's money, but it's something even more sinister than that that's around. So that's just a key point. It's hard for the guards to say that to you, right? But they do a brilliant job on the stuff. I'm not blowing smoke up. I'm just literally being honest about it.
I know Paul's chomping at the bit to answer this, but sorry, Pat, but there's a Paul as well on this end.
Bask in the glory, I think, for a minute, Pat. Go on, just enjoy the glory.
So what you've said, just to summarise that, knowledge is power, yeah, and that we must communicate at events like this, yeah, on a peer level as well, but it's sharing information and being aware, and everybody is responsible, basically, yeah. That's where you want to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you think of that from the point of view of if your bank account is compromised, who are you going to blame? The bank? But you didn't do the updates on your phone, but you used the free Wi-Fi. My wife.
We're all blaming her.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all play a part in that. And, the telco provider, so many loops in that chain along the way. Look, when COVID happened, we all had to play our part. Wash your hands, wear face masks, cyber hygiene. Right? We all play a part in cyber hygiene. Most attacks are based on known vulnerabilities. They're low-level attacks based on the fact that there's been a published vulnerability and the instructions on how to exploit that vulnerability. So if we all react to this and we all patch when the companies release the patch and we patch them, you're making it really hard. You're closing the windows, you're locking the door, you're putting the alarm on, they're moving on. They move on. The internet's flat. They're moving on to another country. They're moving on to another sector. That's it, they're gone. So we can all make it much harder for them. And it is about hygiene. I always relate back to this whole thing about cyber hygiene and so on, because it is so important. And the amount of organizations are missing that, large and small. It's a really crucial point to take away from this event today, to get the basics right. I mean, and even what Paul's saying there about information sharing, that's a pillar of DORA. Sharing information. We started our community, the ICTDF, about sharing information. It takes a network to defeat a network. In Yarka Kurla Kayla, in unity there's strength. That's what it's about. Right? And the bad guys have events like this, and they have big parties, and they share information, they teach and help each other, and all that kind of stuff. So this is about peer group exchange. It's about being honest as well, and not go, oh, the banks, oh, the guards, blah, blah, blah. We all play a part, and we all should take that responsibility.
I would quite like to get invited to the bad guys conference, so just
Let me in about 3
Pat, you wanted to pick up on some of Paul's comments.
I'm going to bring Paul along to the next few presentations I have to make.
Bring him along to everything.
No, but it's but it is a very important point, and I know we might sound like we harp on about reporting, but I cannot overstate the value in reporting. Like, at the end of the day, anything that's reported to us is treated with the strict, the utmost confidentiality. But we also, it's not even about just, I suppose, the European networks we have or the worldwide networks. It's about the home networks, and like, we have a massive social media. The guards have massive social media platforms there, where if something needs to be communicated out, so something might affect a business, but it also might affect an individual, someone at home or whatever, and that's the reality of it. So really, we want to be aware so we can communicate that out to the public generally and say, look, we're aware that this is happening, and we do it. But if we don't know about it, it can be a challenge for us, and if someone even leaves it too late, well then, unfortunately, someone else might be a victim of a particular scam or whatever it is. So all I would ask is that, early reporting is really, really important for us, just so we know what's happening.
Thank you. I'm going to throw open to questions in a minute, but I just wanted to ask one last question of everyone before we do that, and we'll start with you, Paul. I remember reading, and I've been told this constantly over the years, reporting on cybercrime and all the rest, is, the criminals are always one step ahead. We're always in catch-up mode. I'm just wondering, is that true? Has that changed? Can we get ahead of the criminals?
No, because we don't think like they do. Yeah. And they actually create opportunities for themselves. And I think it was in Paul's presentation this morning, he had a police car chasing a car, and the car was meandering about, and he was never going to catch it. And he used that example to say that these guys will always be in front of us. Yeah. So there is always a bit of retrospective engineering required, but hygiene is so important to make sure that you're preventing rather than facilitating. Okay.
That makes perfect sense. Anyone else want to pick up on that?
Where do we go from there? We do actually catch up with the cars the odd time now.
Good to hear.
But yeah, no, sorry, the question was just in relation to...
Just, is it always catch-up mode in terms of
well,
cybercrime?
I suppose, you know, again, getting back to, I suppose, their business models, like they have the assets, the resources. Unfortunately, there's, you know, when there always is an element of catch-up, but as I've seen myself over the last number of years, and you know, whilst we do have fantastic disruption operations with regards to some of the bigger groups and things like that, they're very quick to move on as well. And unfortunately, a lot of these threat actors are acting in jurisdictions where we just can't, you know, put cuffs on, as they say. But at the same time, there's other ways there where we can look at sanctions and different things. So, but trust me, we're always, you know, trying to be a step ahead where we can. That can be a challenge sometimes, there's no doubt about it. But we will continue to, especially from a law enforcement side anyway, we always are proactively trying our best to disrupt where we can and also identify where these threat actors are. And indeed, you know, sometimes they do travel as well, even though they're outside various different jurisdictions. But as I said at the start, we do have threat actors operating within the EU as well. Yeah. So, like, you know, so it's definitely a challenge, but we will always do what we can with the resources that we have.
And Tracy, you've already touched on this in terms of adversarial AI. What's your
Yeah,
take?
absolutely. And I think, you know, it's easier to attack than it is to defend. It's much harder to defend because you don't know where you've got to put that defence up. So I think we have a hard job in order to be able to try and do that. And I think it'll be quite a while before in a position where we're truly proactive and ahead of the game. And we're not always in a defensive position. And, you know, we, as you said, we operate within the law. So we're operating to a different set of rules to threat actors, to hackers. So they don't abide by the laws that we have in place. So we have geographical divides. We have different governments that have different opinions on how to protect and use technology. Often they're put in place by people who don't understand technology, so they don't necessarily help us to defend in a good way. But technology is truly global, so it is boundaryless. So we've got some significant issues globally if you just look at how countries operate, how governments operate, in order to be proactive in the first place. So I think it'll be a long time before we're in a position to do that.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Jill, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, if we relate it to the physical world as well, and I think that it's a mindset change. It's about potentially looking at what the potential risks could be before we take action. So if I were to be walking from A to B, say, if it's getting a bit dark, would I go the most direct route? Would I be going through the park, or would I be taking a slightly longer route and walking along the lighted footways? If somebody knocks on my door and I'm not expecting somebody, I'd look out the window to see if I recognise them. And it's sort of having that mindset change to say, well, let's not just take the quickest route. It's exactly the same. If we can translate that into the online world and have that mindset change to always be wary, always think about what could potentially be happening rather than just assuming everything's going to be okay, then we will be, we'll be helping ourselves in the first place. And that's going to take time because we've not grown up in the online world, but it's ingrained in us in the physical world.
Absolutely, and that's something that you touched on, obviously, there, Paul, when you were mentioning about the fury there would be if there were handbags being stolen.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the enemy of cybersecurity or safety online and in the digital world is cynicism, right? We can't all just go, oh yeah, sure, look, they're always going to win, they're always going to have a way. They first mover advantage, okay? But think of what they're after. Right? They're not just after money. They're not just after your data. They prey on children. They prey on society. They prey on all sorts. So what we're talking about is evil. So without name dropping, but I was doing a talk with Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the web. So there you go, name drop, boom. And we talked about humanity. The internet is humanity connected. And when you get deep into this and you look at the infographic I use this more, the main threat actor groups, they all have different motivations. Some do it for their ideology. Some do it for money. Some do it for kicks. Some do it because they're pissed off. All different reasons, whatever. But that commonality is a sense of darkness or evilness, and they're willing to try and do things that are not right morally, ethically. They may think they are. or they may be just looking for monetary gain. So when it comes to the organized cyber criminals, that $1 trillion economy that surpassed drug trafficking as the #1 crime in the world, when it comes to that, the more difficult you make it for them, the more money they have to invest in the crime, the less return they're getting, they will move on. They will try and do different models. They may even get legitimate businesses. You look at the Conti ransomware group, $160 million in the first year with 60 staff, about 20 of them in an office and 40 of them remote. That's a worldwide business. They're a tech company. They're like a startup in Silicon Valley, right? You're dealing with innovators, entrepreneurs who are not hamstrung by doing VAT returns and legislation and regulations and all the burden that comes along with running a normal day-to-day business.
No GDPR concerns on that side.
No concerns there, I can tell you. So look, you need to be passionate if you're working in the world of cybersecurity. You need to care, you need to give a shit, right? If you want to work in this space, because it's hard and it's constant learning, and you need to care about what you're actually doing in this space. And it's a very rewarding career for people because they can help businesses deliver on their business model, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a bank, whether you're whatever, right? And you're helping society evolve and develop and keep all of that economy going and everything else like that. Because at the end of the day, that digital society is interconnected and interdependent. Hospitals need banks, they need to pay staff. You know, we need garages, we need retail, we need all of these things. So we're all playing our little part, not just as consumers, but as those that can provide education, those that can provide guidance, those that can provide knowledge. There's over 100 years of knowledge up here on this stage, like around this space, right? So that's unique in itself in a relatively new industry, right? And putting on people like us to be able to share that and be able to disseminate that in a non-vendor way is really, really important because this education won't come, quite frankly, from academia. Because that is like legislation, so far behind by the time it gets there. We need cutting edge information, intelligence sharing. You need courses fit for industry. You need knowledge sharing. Knowledge is power, and we all need to share and collaborate with that knowledge to defeat these guys. That knowledge is as much as reporting information to a guard. That's sharing knowledge, that's sharing intelligence. As it is, you know, somebody like an organization providing a toolkit free for people to get cyber hygiene in place. As it is for ICT SkillNet to be able to provide subsidies for training courses. This is all the good, positive stuff that defeats cyber evil, and we all need to work together to do that. Hence, organizations obviously like ICTF are so important in this role as well. So I will get a plug in for ourselves, but there you go. So, you know, that's it. I just think that it's too easy for me to shrug the shoulders and say, sure, nothing's 100% secure. What's the point? What's the point in reporting to the guard? I'm just sick of that. You hear this so much, but so much can be done. We've caught loads of bad guys. We've stopped loads of bad things happening. We've put them out of business, and the guards are essentially world champions at that, effectively on a league table from that point of view. So we have to feed into that. And as I said, I mentioned work up at Stormont on a board up there, I work at the National Crime Agency in the UK, all that kind of stuff. And I can tell you, there is a point, but be proactive. Reach out to the guards before it happens. Build a relationship, find out what numbers you're meant to call, which part of the guards you're meant to deal with, all of those kind of things. Get part of that community. You need a human network as well to deal with all this stuff, and that's based on trust, and that's based on eyeball-to-eyeball relationships. So you need to get those kind of things in place as well.
Excellent, that's great, thank you. Talking of eyeball-to-eyeball relationships, has anyone got any questions that they want to ask the panel here?
Could I just add to that quickly?
Oh yeah, go on, yep. Sorry.
So I suppose just one of the important aspects of it, and Paul rightly points out, you know, if you were to ask me any advice, it's really, and I think I touched on it earlier on, was about how you respond to when things go wrong, and that's really, really important. Like, you know, I've seen it myself in the past. You can have all the best policies and procedures and oversight and all, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, sometimes things do go wrong, and it's how you respond is how you'll succeed when something goes wrong. So, you know, having that incident response plan, it's so important to understand, you know, what's in it for a start. It's very easy to turn around and say, yeah, we have an incident response plan, but, you know, do you know what's in it? Do you know who to contact if something goes wrong? And indeed, you know, have you tested it? When was the last time you just, you know, took it out and tested to see, is it still relevant? And an important part of that, I would say, is having Garda Síochána as part of your plan. You know, so have us in there. You'll find our details on the Garda website. So, you know, having that response plan is really, really crucial, and knowing what's in it and knowing that it's still relevant, because if something does go wrong someday, you'll be relying on that. And at least if that's up to date and you know exactly what's in it, well, you're on a good start.
That's great. Thanks, Pat. Now, we'll start with you there if you want to. Could you give us your name and let us know where you're from?
Thank you, Hal. So my name is Noel Davidson. I'm from the Entrepreneurs Academy, and we deliver training on behalf of local enterprise officers and small and medium enterprises. The reason I say that, 2 compliments and a question. Out of all the sessions today, I think this has been the most valuable because you brought it down from a corporate governance level to a human level,
Great.
like we mentioned. And Pat mentioned there small to medium enterprises as the target of bad actors. Paul Dwyer, I remember hearing him saying many, many years ago, and it stuck with me, the number 1 vulnerability lies between the seat back and the keyboard. And I never forgot that. And it came home to roost last week, where a young, brand new staff member, 4 days with ourselves, got an email and spent Friday afternoon travelling around Dundon Shopping Centre buying iTunes vouchers to the value of €1,250. Pat, I want to pay a compliment to your colleagues. Friday afternoon she was in Tarla Garda Station in a flood of tears reporting it, and they were fantastic. Rang Apple and they said, with the report, we'll give your money back. She had the money back by 7 o'clock that evening. But it's shone a light on us, you know, a cobbler has poor shoes for his family. You know, we're delivering training. And I think that's the question, because Tracy touched on it. Training. We can put all the cybersecurity and cyber hygiene in place and teach people, as Paul said, to wash their hands. But if we're not putting the training in, it is still a massive vulnerability that lies between the seat back and the keyboard. So the question is to all the panel members, training, value.
Lovely. Thanks so much for that. You want to talk on that?
Yeah, well, look, from my perspective, I think training and awareness is key. There's no doubt about it. You can't underestimate the value of it. People need to know what these threats are. It's all, again, and plain language, but also that they are not afraid to put up their hand if something doesn't look right. And I think that's really, really important, you know, because as I said at the very, very start, you know, when it comes to cybercrime, it's wide-ranging. It comes in all shapes and sizes, if that makes sense. But you know, and it's not just a big ransomware attacks. It's the simple phishing email that comes in that looks genuine, that someone clicks on something. That's what you need. Exactly. But that's the sort of stuff you need to be aware of. You know, if something looks too good to be true, it probably isn't true. You know, that kind of way. So it's the small things that people need to be aware of and what to be looking out for. Because they can lead on to bigger things, as we all know. So really, it's that awareness, you know, with staff, that they know what to be looking out for and what things can go wrong. It's like getting a phone call from someone pretending to be a manager and asking them to do something. Well, is there a procedure in place if something like that does happen, or staff are aware? But that just won't happen, you know. Or to pick up the phone and say, look, I just got a call here. Is this okay, to double check? It's that level.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're playing on, and they're watching for when you announce a new staff member, and then they'll send her an email with the CEO name. And they're so eager to please.
Yeah.
You know, 4 days in, we just didn't get a chance to do the training. Sorry.
Yeah. No, and I was going to say, having that, this is what I will never do from the very top. I'm never going to ask you to do this. I'm never going to send you that. And if you do get something like that, it's essentially not from me. Use another means and double check. Don't just do it.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's not just about training, it's about policy and culture. So you have to have in organisations a culture of very open communication, if knowing that people can come forward if they've hit the wrong button rather than trying to hide it. But training needs to be continuous. It can't be a one and done thing. And I think particularly around cyber, people need that continuous training programs. And we've got vendors downstairs like YouSecure who offer that continuous training model that can be delivered out. I mean, my company, outside of CompTIA, we do human cyber awareness training. And it never ceases to amaze me how much people are frightened when they find out how much at risk they are from things like social media. You know, the fact that they've got all their family on Facebook, they've got their pets, their favourite places, and all the things that are used for bank security, and where they're going, and that they've left their house unattended, and all those kinds of things. They're just basics that people think, well, I'm just sharing with my friends what's going on in my world. But there are other people that can be watching those. There are fake accounts out there that are very easy to set up and much harder to take down. So training is a continuous thing. It needs to be backed up with policies. So, you know, if you're a new starter in a business, you should absolutely go through an induction program that says things like, you know, if you're working in the accounts department and somebody sends you an email to pay this amount, this is the procedure that you go through. You check it this way. If a client sends through an invoice and it's got different bank account details on, this is the call that you make and who you make it to validate that that's correct. So I think it's a marriage of culture, policy and training.
That's great, thank you.
Just add to that, Charlie, just
in a second.
in relation to leadership training, if I may. There's lots of different kinds of training and they all have a value. Training operationally around how to follow a procedure and so on is really, really important. But when it gets into what we talk about the culture of an organization, the culture of an organization comes from the policies. Where the policies come from. They come from the very, very top. And they're meant to go through a procedure known as CRAP, right? Create, review, approve, and publish. That essentially becomes the internal law of the organization on what their view and their take is and how they do things, backed up by procedures, backed up by work list instructions and checklists, and they create evidence. All of this is mandated under law by DORA to train your leaders, then to train operationally, and even to train your supply chain on how you're going to handle incidents. So there's all different kinds of training that are really, really important. But it maintains that culture, establishes, and everybody realizes it's okay to put your hand up and say, I think I clicked on something I shouldn't have, and not turn it into an anxiety that people go, oh, I think I only got 85%, whatever. You know, but it has to come from the top. If the tail tries to wag the dog, it's not going to work. Cyber is a leadership challenge, the top down. That's the most effective way to do this. So you need to start, even with DORA, start with training the leaders and trickle down, because then they understand what needs to be in the policies. You're not constantly fighting upwards and explaining that things don't fit.
Great, thank you. Now, sorry, man at the back there.
Yeah, hi, my name is Stephen Kerr. I work in a local authority. My question actually relates to a role last year when I was working with an engineering company in Meath who had found that a fake domain had been set up in order to email customers looking for change in banks to get money. They went to the local Garda station and they were asked, was any money taken? Because no money was taken, he was told to go away. Now, I'm not saying that to criticise you, because I'm wearing another hat. I sit in the JPC, so I dealt with your colleagues in cybersecurity, and I know how skilled they are. But as we're talking about training, and the Garda station, the Garda station is probably most people's first interaction with the Garda. Is there a case that maybe there should be training there as well? Because even though no money was taken, they did try to take money.
Yeah.
So I would assume that in itself is a crime.
Yeah, no, look, I hear you, and training begins at home with us as well, and indeed our organisation. And we've invested a lot of time and effort in training. And I'm not saying, look, they're not going to be experts, because, you know, it takes time to bring people up to a level of a cyber investigator with regards to digital forensics and everything else. But we have definitely provided training now, modules where it's to bring, I suppose, the knowledge of all officers across the organisation, bring their knowledge up with regards to cybercrime and what is a crime basically when it comes to you know, to cyber incidents. You know, coupled with that, we're also looking at all the new recruits that are coming through. A lot of them are very tech savvy as it is, to be honest, but just to bring that awareness in around cyber incidents and cybercrime itself, so they fully understand where they can go if they need help. And indeed, an awful lot of these investigations are taken on locally as well. But we've also, in the last 3 years now, we've opened up a number of cyber hubs throughout the country. So at the moment, we've one in Galway, we've one in Cork, we've one in Wexford, and one in Mullingar, and we're going to be opening up one in Cavan as well now soon. And really, that's also to provide for a more localised response to cybercrime, and also to provide support at a local level within divisions. So there's a lot of work happening in that space, and we're still on a path, I would say. But definitely, you know, our priority was to ensure that we were raising the awareness and the knowledge of all law enforcement, or all guards throughout the organisation, to ensure that they had a level of understanding of all cyber-type crimes.
That's great. Thanks, Pat. Now, I think we've maybe time for one last quick question, if anyone has one. It's fine if you don't. We won't cry. It's okay. It's fine. No, I don't think so. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Thanks ever so much for taking the time out to listen. Thank you ever so much for my guests, Paul, Pat, Tracy, Jill, and other Paul. And thanks again for your attendance here for the whole day. And we look forward to seeing you again next year, or in about 10 minutes down the pub as well. All right, thanks very much, guys. Bye-bye.